That show got me through some of those really hard days at that point in time. Like, man, if it wasn't for that show, I don't know how I would have gotten through, because it's like, okay, this day has beaten me down from 2 to 3 p.m. when I watch this show. And then I would come out of it at least feeling better enough to get to the other end of the day. And, and then see my family and maybe relax and stuff for the evening, get up the next day and see what was going to come my way that day, or what balls I was going to have to bat back that day. But that was that comfort food that I needed at that time. And I'm not surprised, of the source of it, because, people online that know, I've always adored Drew Barrymore. Don't ever ask why. And the reason why is very simple. She makes me smile.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 457 of the podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Today's episode, I have an interview with Patrick Scott Patterson, or Scott to his friends. Now, Scott is a Texas-based pop culture personality, a video game historian, and a podcaster. Over the decades, he's moved from professional wrestling rings to television cameras, working with G4 TV to produce the first ever live arcade world record broadcast. He's appeared in documentaries like Nintendo Quest and on MeTV's Collector's Call. He's spoken at San Diego Comic-Con and South by Southwest. He runs Hyperspace Arcade Repair out of Denton, Texas, where he keeps vintage arcade machines alive for collectors. Now, last year, in 2025, Scott launched the Patrick Scott Patterson Project, a podcast about chasing goals and following unexpected paths, inspired by finally meeting his lifelong celebrity crush, Drew Barrymore, which taught him that the dreams we pursue have a way of opening doors we never anticipated. And when I first caught wind of the Patrick Scott Patterson Project, I knew I wanted to talk to Scott about the podcast, why he launched it, and so much more. And we talk about all those things. That's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by my affiliate link to Manuscript Report. If you've ever stared at a blank screen, trying to write your own blurb, your own sales copy, you'll appreciate a quick and easy DIY tool that can help. Manuscript Report analyzes your finished manuscript and delivers a complete marketing package in minutes. You get blurbs, keywords, comp titles and authors, audience personas, even ad copy. What used to take endless, painful, and agonizing hours, days, and weeks can be completed in just a fraction of that time. Heck, it's like having a marketing consultant on demand. If you want to check out how you can benefit from it, go and check out manuscriptreport.com and use my code MARK10, that's MARK10, to save 10% off. And now comments from recent episodes. Over on episode 454, Finding Surprising Success Publishing Kids Books with Darcy Pattison, Edwin Downward says at starkreflections.ca, my big takeaway from this episode falls under the category of building connections. The how of Darcy using the connections she was building to ask questions about how to best place her books has me feeling a little jealous. This is an area so many of writers need to navigate as we search for ways to reach out to our target audience. Thanks for that, Edwin. I could not agree more. I was so inspired by how Darcy does that, and I want to learn by remembering what she does the next time I'm asking those questions and interacting in the community. Again, constantly learning, just like you. For episode 456 over on YouTube, Sylvania Soule commented in reaction to me asking about leaving some of my errors and mistakes in the episode, rather than editing them out, which I did with that last episode. Sylvania says, "It's the flubs that make us human. They are appreciated." And I appreciate that, Sylvania. Thanks for letting me know. And over on Substack, where I posted about my 8 years of podcast, I got plenty of love and plenty of comments. One came from Writer on the Edge, who commented on my post 8 years, 452 episodes and one simple truth over on Substack, and said, "I just listened to episode 1 of your podcast out of curiosity, and it's amazing how relevant it still is today, 8 years later. It's really cool, so I'm looking forward to episode 2 with Joanna Penn." Well, thanks for that, Writer on the Edge. And who knows when you're going to get all the way caught up to this episode, but I do appreciate your comment. And I'm so glad, it's so interesting that, 8 years ago, that what I had to say in that first episode still resonated with you. And it's so funny, that episode 2 with Joanna Penn, was when Joe had just co-authored a book called The Healthy Writer, which I still think is so critical and so important today. I mean, it was a few years later, that Joanna and I co-authored The Relaxed Author. And again, the same idea. I think that the healthy writer and the relaxed author kind of go hand in hand. We need, more than ever before, to take care of ourselves, to take care of our physical and mental and emotional well-being. So again, thank you for that, Writer on the Edge. Now, I also heard from a few people who messaged me directly to thank me for what I shared in my quite emotional personal update and commentary for episode 455 about the absolute BS that's happening in the U.S. right now. I appreciate those comments, and I understand why many folks are making those comments privately. I get it. But I want to thank you so much for reaching out and letting me know that my words are having a positive impact on you. Like I said, it's important that people don't think that they're on their own. And now more than ever, those of us who are privileged and lucky to not be in the throes of the violence and terror, we need to use our voices to let those who are in the middle of it know that we're with them. And that's one of the things I really like about this conversation with Scott is it is, unlike the negativity and the BS in the world, his podcast, this project, is about positivity. It's about shining a bright light, and we need that so much, and I'm so glad this timing. Now, we did this interview back in September of 2025 after I'd reached out to him, I think a couple months earlier, and we had, just scheduling wise, we finally connected, and I think it was early September. And the podcast has significantly grown since that chat. And I'm so glad he's doing it because we do need that positivity. But I'm going to get to that very shortly. But first I'm going to roll a bumper and offer a bit of a personal update. Personal update wise, I will do, as I always say, try to keep this quick. So Once Bitten, I've gotten the next Canadian Werewolf book, the novella, book 8, coming out. I've spent quite a bit of time working on that, and then I've actually decided to change the process by which I'm formatting my print books, etc., and ebooks. And I'm going, toggling from the computer I know and love over to the Mac I was forced to buy when I was in the Western Colorado University publishing program. I figure I may as well put it to good use. I did purchase Vellum. I love Vellum. I think it's great. I'm just not a big fan of the Mac, just the differences, right? And it's probably because I'm so used to using, it was kind of like when I was hunting and pecking, when I was first learning how to type when I was, 13, 14, and then actually having to learn how to type for real. You kind of have to retrain yourself, maybe the way Neil Peart retrained himself on how to hold drumsticks and how to drum, well after, platinum records and all the accolades and awards. It's the same sort of thing. So I don't know if I'm ready to retrain myself on the Mac, but at the very least, I'm using vellum, and I'm toggling this stuff over. So my procedure is I take the documents. I'm still doing everything on my PC laptop, and then I'm putting it in shared drive via Google, logging on to my Mac, going in, loading it into Vellum, doing some tweaking in Vellum, and then exporting the print file and the EPUB file. And then going back to my regular computer and loading that and getting it published. So what I like about Vellum is it's tighter and cleaner, doesn't require as much of the manual steps that I do along the way. And I'm going to go back and redo the entire Canadian Werewolf series that way, bit by bit. I'm also going back and doing some cleanup because I have to go back and research as I'm writing these next books in the series. I'm going back and having to dig into them anyway, so I may as well go through and do some of that tidying up and that cleaning up, because there's still, it doesn't matter how many times it's been edited or proofread or whatever, there's always a new typo or an old one that never got caught, or some weird transmogrification of words, transplant of words that are just wrong. And I'm like, oh my God, how did nobody catch this in all these years? Well, maybe some readers caught it because, every once in a while you see those reviews, you're like, yeah, dude can't write. But in any case, I'm doing that work. And one of the cool things I've noticed is it's a little bit tighter. So the cool thing about this is something to pay attention to, is I've been using a word template. I purchased a word template for self-publishing back in like 2012 or something like that, maybe earlier than that. And then I modified it over the years using a font I preferred and line spacing and stuff like that. And that's kind of the format I use. But with Vellum, it's even tighter. And it means the page count is going to be a little bit lower, which means two things. I can reduce the price of the print books because the page count is slightly lower, or I can have that little bit of extra margin because, cost is going to go up. So as the costs go up and I'm reducing the page count, I can probably keep the same price. And that's one of the strategies I'm doing. I'm also strategically going through and updating the back matter of all those books, and so that there's the direct connection to the next book and the teaser and all of those things. I'm trying to make that as solid as possible because I've got a promo. I've got a BookBub new releases for less promo for Once Bitten, book 8, which is coming out at the end of February. So I realized I got to get the rest of this all solidified. I've even booked a promo for Lover's Moon, which is coming out in, the promo's coming out on the 13th of February. It's the romantic comedy in the series. But I also recently did the read by the author version of Lover's Moon, which is available serialized chapter by chapter on YouTube. But I did a single, 6 hours and 40-minute audio of Julie and I reading. Not the one that Scott and Sarah did, which cost a few $1,000s to produce, but the one that Julie Strauss and I did, read by the author. So I made that available over on YouTube. I thought, let's celebrate that. And I've even had some fun playing with some software that can turn your book cover into animations, and it's so cool to see Gail animated with her hair blowing in the wind and the wolf behind her and the wolf feathers, and I started playing around with that and having, okay, so the wolf howls and disappears, and then Michael comes from off screen and they embrace, just some fun goofing around. Probably spent way too much time doing that instead of writing. But that's what's going on personal update wise. I'm gonna stop now. I'm going to roll the bumper, and we're going to get into this fantastic interview with Scott about the Patrick Scott Patterson Project. Hey, Scott, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to get to talk to you, and the talk with you has been delayed several times due to weird circumstances, but that's life, right?
No, I understand. My schedule is insane, and then there's always, life likes to throw the wrenches in your way sometimes. So I understand. I'm a patient man. It might not always look that way, but I am. Things happen when they're meant to happen, right?
So before we get into talking about your podcast and the inspiration for it and what it's all about and why I think people should listen to it, who is Patrick Scott Patterson? What's his background? Where did he come from? And so we can get into how you got into podcasting in the first place.
Well, I mean, I could sit here and cite a really unique and possibly bizarre sounding resume. But long story short, I'm a kid that, grew up and wanted to do things. I had parents who, I mean, listen, they provided, there was a roof over my head and food in the fridge and that sort of thing. But, they did not get along. Let's just put it that way. And I think a big part of why was because neither of them ever did the things that they wanted to go do. My mom wanted to be the great American author, but she
Right.
never wrote a book, right?
Oh,
My dad had a chance to go play semi-pro ball. He mentioned something about it once. I never pried. But he had chances to go help in with people and start his own small business. Never did that. I mean, neither of them ever did the things that they wanted to go do, and they were unhappy with what they did do. And I think that's part of why they didn't get along and why they were often so busy fighting that they weren't, really parents a lot of the time. I decided I never wanted to do that. I never wanted to be that guy. I never wanted to
right.
sit there, when I got, a little gray in the beard and everything else, start going, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that. I never wanted to be that guy. So I have never been that guy. I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I did that for 10 years. I never made it to WWE, but I was on cable TV. I was on
Wow.
DVD. I was in the PWI 500. I did that. I wanted to work in television, and I still do that. I've done that quite a bit at a time. I'm in documentary films. I've spoken at conventions across the country. I've been a published author. I mean, I could go on all day long. It's just that the whole thing with me is like, okay, I want to go do these things. This is
Right.
something I'm interested in. This is something I want to do, and let's go try. And so, that's me in a nutshell. When it comes down and people ask me, and maybe they know me from one specific thing and they don't know about the rest of it, or at least at first or whatever, that's what always it comes down to. I get asked by people, well, why did you go do this, or what got you started in that? And it's really just wanted to.
Wow.
Just decided to try.
Well, I love that idea, especially using that example of seeing people who didn't follow that passion or the dream and the regret we might have at the end, right? When we didn't try the things. So I have to ask because you mentioned a few of the things you've tried. Is there something that you had like maybe when you were a young teenager or whatever? Because I mean, I wanted to be a stuntman. I wanted to do so many things that I didn't get a chance to do. But that was a fleeting moment. Where there's moments that were a little bit more than fleeting, where you're like, well, there's still these things I want to do. Because I imagine your bucket's pretty big, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm in the podcasting now, and I think podcasting is the modern version of this. One of the earlier things I wanted to do going back into high school is I want to go on the radio.
Ah, okay.
Now that we're talking early 90s here,
Yeah.
radio was way different back then. It was actually interesting. You had jocks that actually got the program time to talk and
Right.
subjects and some of these different things. And I actually dabbled in that a little bit in my freshman and sophomore years of high school. Again, it's a long, convoluted story that I won't go into at the moment, but it's a fun one that I ended up getting forming a friendship with a evening DJ here in the Dallas Fort Worth area through a contest that the radio station had held. And so for a while, I was actually calling in at night, playing different characters, things like that, just to kick off conversations
Oh,
on
wow.
his show. And it's like, man,
Well,
this
did
is
the
fun.
host know that was you every time?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes,
So it was a bit that you guys did. Okay, I
right.
thought maybe like you were just
Right. No,
having
we got
fun.
along. We got
Okay.
along. And then I'd call him up some nights, and some nights he would sit there and say, hey, I have this idea. Other nights I'd say I'd have an idea, and they would do that. Maybe they needed to promote this radio contest, and then he needed somebody to, say something in a certain way. And I'd like, well, okay, here's how I can do this. Like,
Right.
we, well, to date the whole thing, for example, they were doing tickets for an appearance by somebody that was on Beverly Hills 90210.
Okay.
And he needed to promote that in some exciting kind of way. So I pretended to be some little kid that misunderstood, and it's like, yeah, I'm calling. You said something about the Beverly Hillbillies, and he's like, no, 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 and just pretended like we didn't know. The thing is, what I didn't know is that he stuck it on there unedited. He just threw it, and I had fun with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I never ended up. getting to try any of that sort of
So
thing.
never in studio. You were always calling in then, right? Is
Correct.
that okay?
Correct. So it's interesting how that kind of went by over here for a long time. And I pursued other things, and I was contributing to a magazine and I went into the pro wrestling business and I ran my first small business around that same time and all these other things. I would end up through these things being interviewed on radio shows sometimes, including that station, which is really kind of wild. But it's funny when I came back around to wanting to do a podcast, I'm like, in a way that actually is kind of going back and getting back to that because I got to imagine that if I'd ever done the radio thing, it probably would have ended up something like this anyway.
Right, right. Well, I mean, like a talk radio that you would have wanted to do rather than,
Oh
or did you
yeah.
want to be like Johnny Fever, doing
I did love that show. I do love WKRP. It's one of my favorite shows ever. But no, I would have definitely. I'm a talker. I
yeah,
mean, it's,
yeah. It's like it would be a
people,
song every hour.
yeah, people, something like that. People, whether people like me or they dislike me, the one thing everybody will agree on is that I'm a talker. So it just kind of seems natural that I should be talking.
Cool. Go. No, I'm curious because you never like when you hear like DJ or radio personality or DJ or whatever. I mean, there's a great local Mike Farwell who's on the talk radio here locally in Kitchener Waterloo, and again, it's one of the shows that I actually because I'm not listening to top 40 radio anymore because I want the conversation, right? I want to
Yeah.
get some news and I want to get some conversation, and Mike does some really great bits. But so you had that inkling, but now you've seen it through with your podcast. When did that podcast start to materialize as I think I'm going to do this, and then actually happen?
Actually, quite a few years ago. I think 2021 was the first time that I'm like, I should probably do this. It's not like I was new to podcasts. I've seen them. There had been a little dabbling in years before that. I remember somebody asking me to be like a co-host of theirs once, and we
Okay.
lasted about two episodes
Oh,
before the people. Well, no, well, the people we were talking about video game stuff, and the people who he had assigned to me, I guess there just wasn't really a chemistry there. I'm like, hey, I want to talk about this the next thing, and then they took it in a very negative direction and it was about a video game documentary. And the problem was not even just the negative direction, but the fact that the documentary was about friends of mine. So, in which they didn't know that, but still, it's like this becomes very awkward at this point. So that just
right.
wasn't going to work. As far as me, like, I think I'm going to do this. Yeah, it was sometime in 2021, but I was going through a lot of stuff. And on top of that, I wasn't quite sure what the catalyst would be.
Right.
There's a trillion podcasts out there,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to just be white noise, out this kind of floating out in the wind. And so it kind of became an idea of at some point kind of thing. And now it's not.
So, what's the pod like? What's the log line that you use when you describe the podcast to people? Like, what's the is there something that can capture it in just a handful of words?
Yeah, well, the Patrick Scott Patterson Project, it's a podcast about chasing goals, putting yourself out there and following the paths that open up along the way. And
Sounds
that's
like your
literally
life.
that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
It's earlier this year was an opportunity for me where I got to cross a lot of things off the proverbial bucket list at the same time. Not a fan of the term bucket list, by the way. I think
Oh, wow.
it comes off to me as too much of a, well, you're gonna die someday, you better do this stuff, as opposed to I'm living now. We need a better term than bucket list, but
Yeah,
it's
we
what
got to
people
come up with something. Have any
it,
ideas? Like
no, no. But it's what people understand. So I use it with an asterisk every
Yeah,
time. But
fair enough.
but I did that. And I had people who saw that. I'm not mentioning what I did just yet because I think there's going to be a callback towards that shortly. But um, there were people who started contacting me that had been watching me for a long time, following me on social media through all these different adventures for a long time. And they started telling me things like, wow, you did that. That inspired me to go do this thing that I've been talking about doing, or that inspired me to give this a shot. And holy crap, it worked. And it's like, well, shoot, there's the catalyst, there's the podcast, there it is, right there. I wanted it to be something positive, of course, but that's like the specific angle of it. So I talked to my guests. Some of them are very well-known guests, like Jim O'Hare, who played Jerry on Parks and Rec. He was my first guest. Marilyn Gigliotti from Clerks, she was my second guest. I've got some exciting guests coming up as well. And then sometimes it's people who are on their way up or that maybe I want to put an extra spotlight on, as long as they kind of fit that motif, is talking to people who took that leap and went and did something because they wanted to do it or they wanted to try, and where that went for them. And the stories are interesting too, because some of them were blessed with kind of immediate path of success. Like
Yeah.
this turned into this, turned into this, turned into this, and they've never had a bump in the road. Others had huge bumps in the road. So others had big craters in the road, but they got around them or came over them or came back from them.
Right.
And I think that's one of the fascinating things is like, while that is the premise, everybody's story and how they got to what they're doing right now is so wildly different. And I think that's great, not just from the interest point, but I'm hoping that people who, watch or listen to the show, that they can find at least one episode or one person's story that's like, man, I'm going through this right now. And so did this guy. And
Right.
so maybe that'll help, that even if it's just that one person, get to that next thing, get past that point, and or get around that point or whatever. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. There's I don't think there's a giant as big of a gap between people you see finding success and doing things and people who don't. I don't think there's a big, you watch something on TV, you watch an actor on TV, for example, there's not a gigantic gap between your average person and that person, not
Right.
to the degree that people think mentally. It's just the difference is that that's a person who took a shot at something and got somewhere with it. And maybe the person that is on the other end of that perceived gap has not done so yet, or maybe hasn't done so at that right time. Because sometimes you're going to fall on your butt about 200 times for every one time you get to something, right? But that's where it is. And that's really the whole premise of the show. And it seems to be having the effect I want to at least some degree. And it's just kind of keeping it going now.
Cool. Well, I'm eager to get into it because I think I was first attracted to want to talk to you because I saw you're putting out such a positive message. But I want to come back to that because that was like, oh, I've got to talk to this guy. I want to learn from him. This is a going to be a great conversation. But I want to go back to the beginning. So you launched this podcast, and I know other people, maybe particularly in the writing author community, because podcasts. You mentioned that one show lasted 2 episodes, and there's sort of a thing that there was some people that would say, well, I'm not going to be a guest on a podcast if there's less than 13 episodes because I'm not even sure if they have an audience, if it's going to be around. So, but you managed to get some notable, celebrity people on your podcast. Now, is that because they knew who you were and that this wasn't going to pod fade? or I bet you pod fade's another term that kind of you go, oh, I don't like that one.
Well, I think it's more. I mentioned this in an episode that hasn't run of mine yet because they asked my guests. They were the first to ask. I'm not mentioning names yet. I don't no spoilers or anything, but
Okay.
it kind of comes down to a point of these are all either people that I knew from these other adventures that I've
Right.
done, or that are friends of people that I knew.
Okay.
Where it's like, I had a friend of mine that's like, hey, I want to help out, here, and I'm look through my friends list and see if, if I can connect with anybody. I'm like, oh, hey,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they hook me up with a couple people. Others are people that I've known for a long time or have worked with on something. And, almost everybody that I've ever invited so far has said yes.
Yeah.
Most of the ones that weren't an immediate yes we're going to have to schedule slow down or something like that first. But it's kind of that accumulation. If I had
Yeah.
tried to do this, 15 years ago, it would have maybe started out the guest list a little softer, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
but and I'm pitching to a lot of lofty names a lot of the time
Yeah.
too, and not getting anything out of it so far. But it's interesting you mentioned that because I have to confess, going into this, I did a little research on podcasting, but how I research things is always to look for the angles that everyone else is not looking at.
Okay.
So I listened to some shows, for example, and this risks sounding negative, but there's a lot of podcasts that sound exactly like every other podcast. It sound like every other podcast out there. And it's like, okay, I don't want to do this.
Okay.
I don't want to do this format or that format or whatever, because that's what everybody is doing. And
Yeah.
or it's not clear what's going on here. And of course, there's way too many of these, grind my gears podcasts that, try to aim for what they don't like instead of what they do. But that's a whole other topic. But you're the first time I've ever heard like somebody saying, well, I don't want to do a podcast unless it's had this many episodes, because that's very interesting. And it
You've
makes me
never
want,
heard that before. You've never
no,
had people, no?
no, I haven't had anybody do that. I mean, now that doesn't mean that some haven't.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that some haven't looked at it and they're like, well, I'm going to hold off, or well, I'm going to wait.
See if you're around still for a while, right?
Now at this point that we're recording this, I have run 10 episodes. The 11th one is coming up days away. I'm about to take it weekly.
Okay.
I've already got another 11 episodes recorded.
Oh, that's quite a bit in
And
advance. And that
yeah,
was because it was bi-weekly, right?
it was
Before?
bi-weekly.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to do was exactly that, though. I want to get these things in the can when people were available and run
Right.
them later on, because I see a lot that they'll have a podcast and they'll do it live, which to
Yeah.
me is insane anyway. But they'll do it a day or two ahead, and then, oh, that guest had to cancel, that guest had to reschedule, that guest
Yeah.
got trapped under something heavy. And okay, no podcast this week. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's a momentum killer. Um, you know, Barring some unexpected surprise, I should have content for a while. And
Yeah.
and if I, need to pull back or want to pull back, I can. But that's the thing with that. So yeah, I'm planning to be around for a while. When I set this out, kind of had a 2-year plan, in
Yeah.
fact, which I may have to adjust because the numbers. I'm nowhere near claiming to be a major show. I'm sure as heck not a major show yet. I'm not even in sniffing distance of a term
Yet.
like.
Yet.
But the numbers per episode right now are higher than I anticipated they would
Well,
be.
that's fantastic.
And so I'm excited with that, combined with the fact that I know some of the guests that I have coming up or the people that I'm in conversations with, and some of the things I have coming up very, very soon. I have a perfect storm opportunity wise here. And, I'm nervous, but I'm excited. If I
No, that's
if I if I
fantastic.
if I do this the right way, I have an opportunity here to sort of advance the ball quickly.
Yeah. And in a way, in a style that you enjoy yourself, right? Like that's the
Oh
what you
yeah.
wanted to put together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have yet to speak to a guest that um hasn't made me feel excited coming out of it. Maybe for
Yeah.
different reasons, but there's some where I've talked with them and I come out like, shoot, I made a friend today. Things went in a direction and it's like now I'm inspired by this person. And,
Yeah.
going into it, maybe some days too, I was like, okay, it's kind of late at night. I'm a little tired, or it's early in the
Yeah.
morning. I'm like,
Yeah.
but after we get into it, it's like, all right, I feel good now. And the thing is about it is if I feel good about it,
Yeah.
how are other people going to feel about it?
Yeah.
Um, One of the first ones I recorded, and I think it was the third one I ran, was with Tony Luke Jr., who I have known for a long time. He, of course, is a singer, an actor, and king of the Philly cheesesteaks. I met him when I did a show called Frankenfood on Spike TV in 2014. And he was very happy to do the show. But after doing the episode, because he went through so much, he peaked and then went through this dark, dark, dark valley, which I could relate with, and maybe that'll come up in this. Um, and then the way he's come back and the attitude he's had with it is the first thing I did once I wrapped it and had it saved. I went and hugged my family,
Yeah.
because it's like, man, I'm honored that he would share that story, not just with me, but with everybody. And my show gets to share that story with other people, and hopefully it can benefit other people.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a lot better than, shaking my fist at whatever corporate logo change or whatever might have happened today or what might have
Yeah.
happened in a baseball stand or whatever, it's like, let's stuff
Yeah.
like that. Man, we
Yeah.
need more of that stuff out there.
Yeah. So let's get into that. Let's get into that that organic natural conversation, but also there's a positivity and there's like this personal, I think, a personal benefit that people can find in when you listen. Well, I'm going to have a little bit of a sidetrack here. When I listen to people having a conversation, sometimes it's I benefit from just hearing this. It feels like more like a natural conversation. And Mitch Joel, Canadian Mitch Joel, is a digital marketing guru who's one of the earliest podcasts I listened to back in. I mean, he's going on, I don't know, what is it, 15 years, 20, it's like an incredible amount of time. Back when you had to listen to podcasts on these little portable devices, like before even iPods or whatever. And some of them, there were episodes where he was at a coffee shop just having a conversation and then they just recorded it. And it feels like you're kind of listening in to two people having an intimate conversation, but you
Yes.
get the benefit of without being creepy. You
Yeah.
know, and, there's a bit of a style there, but it also there's positivity in it, and I want to dig into. I think that's the main reason I reached out to you when I first caught wind of what you were doing. I went, oh, I got to talk to this guy because the world needs more of this. So let's talk a
So,
little bit about that motivation and that part of the of what you're doing.
well, I'm nothing if not transparent. Let me, I certainly won't say that I've always worn a white hat, so to speak. My younger days, partially because of the parental dynamic that I brought up, I wasn't always about, positivity. I would rant and I would grind my teeth and I would, I could be very cynical
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. I really could. And sometimes I could respond in not the best way to people or adversity or whatever. That was my younger days, and I don't deny that that was there ever,
yeah,
because it wouldn't be honest and forthright to do so. It was a conscious and deliberate effort on my part to try and look for that and to try and be better about that because it's self-defeating when you get hung up on these things too much, and sometimes people they can really get under your skin and it's like,
yeah,
but it's not worth it. I got things I want to go do. I got things that I need to go do. And so we can jump right into 2020 on this. And when I say that to people nod, you're nodding.
yeah.
Um,
It's just like,
but
hmm.
but the thing is though, I had so many things start going on in 2020 that the global pandemic was actually like background noise to it.
Yeah,
I had this very short period of time where it was like, okay, are you kidding me? My small business, which was already going through challenges of the COVID era, had a frivolous lawsuit filed against it. I prevailed, but that's very stressful and time consuming and money consuming. While I was going through that, I was losing friends to COVID. I was losing friendships to people who were telling me that COVID was a hoax while I was losing friends to COVID. That's an interesting dynamic to deal with. My estranged mother passed away. And somehow I knew about it without anybody telling me, which was a weird spiritual moment, I guess. I literally laid down the bed and something said, oh, go read your mom's obituary. And I'm like, okay, why would I do that? And I go and look it up, and 2 hours previous, there was her obituary. There it was. It was weird. And the things that had estranged it had someone from her side of the family who had no information on why we were estranged in the first place, decided to go off on me with all the, tact of your average internet troll. And that was fun. I had a longtime online stalker who I had been warning people about for 8 years, who had threatened me and my family on multiple occasions, and we were laughed off. And he did a murder suicide. Um, so I mean, I was going through all this stuff in very, very, very short order. That's a lot
wow.
to deal with, especially during a global pandemic. Like,
Yeah,
oh my God. Um, it was very difficult to kind of find that peace and that solace. I found it in a then new talk show hosted by, my lifelong celebrity crush, if you will. And it was the Drew Barrymore show. She, for whatever reasons, decided to continue with plans to start a talk show in the middle of a global pandemic. That's a challenge in and of
Yeah.
itself, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect anything less of Drew, but
It would have been a footnote normally. It's like, oh, and it started and the pandemic, so it stopped, right?
right. So she just kept on going. But the thing is that her show, unlike a lot of other talk shows, was conversational more than it was, let's hit the bullet points off the press release. It was like a
Yeah.
conversation, and it was very positive and very constructive. And I'll flat out say that show got me through some of those really hard
Wow.
days at that point in time. Like, man, if it wasn't for that show, I don't know how I would have gotten through, because it's like, okay, this day has beaten me down.
Right, right.
At the time, it aired at 2 p.m. my time. Okay, from 2 to 3 p.m. when I watch this show. And then I would come out of it at least feeling better enough to get
Right.
to the other end of the day, and and then see my family, and maybe relax and stuff for the evening, get up the next day, and see what was going to come my way that day, or what balls I was
Yeah.
going to have to bat back that day. But that was that, like, comfort food that I needed at that time. And I'm not surprised, of the source of it, because, people online that know, I've always adored Drew Barrymore, don't ever ask why. And the reason why is very simple. She makes me smile,
Yeah.
period. I mean, I could sit
Yeah.
here and cite 100 things, but there's just something about her. We're roughly the same age. I'm like 8 months younger than she is, so going all the way back to 82, it's always been around that same age type of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just something about her that's always made me smile and feel better. I could be having a bad day and, watch an interview with her or one of her movies or whatever, and I'll feel better every time. It's just what it is. There's just that power, I guess. So her show came along for me at that right time. And it taught me, though, a little bit about what can be done, because during all of that, um, I had stopped taking care of myself too. My weight ballooned up bad. I'm about 6'4". I've been big. I used to be a wrestler. I've been big-ish, but yeah, I ballooned up during COVID to 330 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And something she said in one of those early episodes was like, sometimes when she's going through it, she likes to look back at old pictures of herself and try to recapture whatever she was feeling at that time. And so I did that. And I looked back at pictures of myself in 2012, 2013, and all that. And one of the things I felt really good about at the time when I did some pretty lofty things in that time. I had lost a bunch of weight before doing it. I felt good, not just physically and healthily, but mentally and emotionally. I'm like, okay, I got to get back to that. So over the course of that next year, yeah, I dropped 100 pounds, and I got back into doing TV, and I got back into doing documentary films. On my 46th birthday, I'd reached the weight loss goal. And that day I shot for a TV series and a documentary movie. Same day, on my birthday, at the reaching the weight loss goal, all because of something she said in her show, a show I was watching at a time where I'm just trying to get through day by day with everything else I had going on. And that was like, okay, if that show and what she's doing and her content can get me to do that for myself, I need to try and do that same thing. There's something to be said, because, man, that was a hard year for everybody, even people who only went through a little bit of what I mentioned. And that's really where I'm like, okay, this is how we need to do things. This is if her doing that can get me to try and do that, then maybe me trying to do that can get some other people to try and do that. And maybe we can sort of counterbalance all of this, cynicism and negativity that's going on. And little did I know at the time that that was going to become more the norm in recent years. But it's a fight worth fighting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by the fact that so you started watching the show because you were a fan. You respected
Yes.
Drew Barrymore. You wanted to say, hey, I want to see what she's doing here. And then instead of the typical or standard surface level celebrity conversations, she gets into the depth. She goes below and gets.
Yes.
I mean, and that's kind of the other inspiration is those are
And
the
has
kinds of
fun doing
conversations
it.
you wanted, right?
And has fun doing it,
Yeah.
and it's keeping it positive. It's not ambush interviews either, where they're like, well,
Right.
what about this thing you said 15 years ago? What
Yeah, I
about
found
that?
this photo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like that. It's
Yeah.
and so I want to preface that as well. But yeah, it's conversational. It's not this paint by numbers daytime talk where the questions are already like, I'm going to ask this and you're going to say this. It's a conversation. Like you're,
Yeah.
again, like you mentioned, two people, you're coming in on two people talking and you're like, oh, wow, this is neat.
Yeah, yeah. And what can I learn from this?
Yes.
But you had mentioned she had shared something about what she did, and you did the same thing, and you learned from that. You grew from that as well, and that's a deeper element too. And again, even before we started recording, we agreed that we both like to just have a conversation. There's no,
Yes.
I mean, yes, I want to talk about your podcast. I want people to check it out because I know they're going to enjoy it, but. I'm also was like, well, what am I going to learn by just having a conversation? Like, how am I going to grow just by engaging in this? And I know from having done, over 400 episodes over the last 8 years that my listeners as well are going to, if I'm benefiting, there are going to be other people who get to benefit too.
Well, that's very kind. I'm hoping people can benefit. I'm never going to be the guy that's like, oh yeah, well the people are taking. I hope that they
Yeah.
will though. I
Yeah.
hope that
Yeah.
they can because, it's, I don't like cliches, but sometimes I use them like bucket list.
Well,
Because
it
I
helps
don't like.
communicate something, right?
Right. That's like, the whole pay it forward. It's a cliche that doesn't
Yeah.
have the power anymore, but it really is kind of a way of paying it forward because, you know, you say have a nice day to one person. Maybe it's the cashier at your local, grocery store. Maybe it's the waitress that
Yeah.
just brought you lunch or whatever. There's a lot of people that won't even say have a nice day to them, but maybe that one person that does,
Yeah.
maybe that and they can say it to someone else. Maybe the next person, maybe the person they say it to is having a bad day and they need to hear that.
Yeah.
It's it kind of just proliferates and goes out there like that. It's contagious, and so is negativity. Uh, we have no shortage of that these days. So,
Yeah.
I feel like we need to try and counterbalance. And I work at this. I have my bad days. I'm not going to sit here and say that I won't mutter something in the middle of a traffic jam like everybody else sometimes. I'm not going to
Mutter.
pretend. I'm
I
not going to,
scream
okay,
sometimes.
all right, guilty. I'm not going to claim that. I'm not going to sit here and we
Yeah.
all have those moments. We're human, but I work at getting over it and trying to be
Right.
kind to other people and trying to do things because I want people to benefit from it. But honestly, it's not purely selfless either. I mean, it makes me feel better too. I mean, I
Yeah.
I definitely feel better when I'm being kind to somebody than if I'm being, angry. I
Yeah.
don't like that. I don't like how I feel if I have to be that way.
Yeah. It reminds me one of my favorite fictional characters from television was Balky Bartokomous, and Bronson Pinchot played,
I
and
love that show.
love that show so much. But there was this genuineness of Balky, just this honestness and openness and stuff. And the one of the things he said is like when you have love and you keep it, what are you keeping it for? Especially and it almost feels. And again, I'm going to go into cliche territory, but the more that you share it, the more you have. And so
Yes.
doing good things can actually make you feel good. So it is selfish in a way to be to
It
be putting
is.
that out, right?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, but that's what it is. And
Yeah.
so to go back though is when I realized, okay, I'm gonna do a podcast. Like I said, this was in 2021. It was after, I'd gone through all this. It's like I want to
Yeah.
do this. But 2021 didn't calm down much from 2020. Um, there were still things happening, and I
Yeah.
won't go into the whole, twisted country song sounding list like I did with 2020, but it was comparable in a lot of ways. And then things got busy for kind of the right reasons for a couple of years. And then 2024 was very rough again. We went through a lot of stuff. And just the whole family this time went through a lot of stuff. My wife had surgery. We'd had a period of time where, um, I won't go into the whole thing. I'm going to reverse the vibe, I feel. But let's put it this way. 2024 was also very, very rough,
Right, right.
and rough to the point where literally once we got past a few things and got to button them up, I literally, I looked up at I sat in this very chair that I'm sitting right now. And I'm like, okay. I looked up, God or the universe, or however, anybody wants to see it. I, I think that, we need to have an open mind and whatever, but I've seen too many things to not think that there's something more to all of this that we can't explain scientifically too. Everybody can determine that in their own way though.
Right.
But I kind of looked up and was kind of like, okay, that's enough of this. Like, I don't know what you're putting me through. I don't know why I'm going through all this stuff, but I'm still here. And whatever the counterbalance to this is, I'd like it now, please. You're kind of like, just kind of laying it out there. Like, that's enough. Let's go the other way. So something that I had planted the seed for in early 2024, then suddenly started to sprout and started to turn into something. And then in the fall, I found out that that was turning into an episode of a TV show that I'd worked with before that we were going to shoot. It was a Drew Barrymore themed episode. And through just sheer twists of fate, chains of fate, whatever you want to put out there, that was actually going to lead me to going to shoot this TV show at her talk show studios and meet her, which on what turned out to be her 50th birthday episode taping at that. And that's what happened. I'd never been to New York City before, weirdly, because I've been all over the rest of this country, but I'd never been to New York City prior to that.
Okay.
So I got to go to New York City. I got to go see things in New York City, and I got to go there and I got to meet Drew, who is exactly the person maybe I even underestimated somehow, which is saying something because I'd already had put her on a pedestal, right? So to speak. And it's like, man,
it wasn't high enough.
Right. So warm and just, and I talk a lot of podcast episodes about that moment, and I'm going to talk about it more coming up. So I'm pulling back a little there because that episode of that TV show, which is called Collector's Call, it's on MeTV. At the time that we're talking here, has not aired yet. It is coming up. And a lot of my podcast is going to center around stuff related to that. And so it'll all kind of come out into the universe fully. But let's just say that was a moment, and it was one that I had 42 years, 8 months, 8 days. I literally counted down. That was from when I would watch ET for the first time and was like, I want to meet her someday, to actually getting the chance to. Well, let me rephrase that. Actually getting the chance to and doing it. I'd had the chance in 2009 and I choked. I froze. I went catatonic and watched her walk away before I'm like, hey, wait. So this was my second opportunity. This time I actually formed at least some sentences. I think. Maybe could have talked more than I did, but hey, I didn't freeze this time fully. But point being is that, coming back from that, like I said, that was the moment where I shared that picture, and people that did understand what that was for me, what that moment was for me, they were the ones that stated that, hey, look, I've been talking about writing this book for 15 years. And after seeing that picture, I just sat down and wrote the introductory chapter. Someone else like, I've always wanted to meet so-and-so, and I know someone that knows them, and I just took the shot. Now I get the chance to meet that person. And people started saying that. And it's like, there we go. Now it's time to start this podcast. This is what I need to be doing because, I've finished the original bucket list, so to speak. And I say original because you're always adding new things to it. There's always new things that open up along the way. And you're like, I'm going to go down here. And this podcast is taking me on that journey too. But, the thing that had been at the top of that bucket list that whole time, which was meeting Drew, had now happened.
Right.
So now it's time, if I can get other people to go do these things for themselves, and maybe they can feel like I feel right now, that's something to put out there.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'm curious because it's organic, it's natural, it's just let's open conversation and it goes wherever it goes. And just to I'm gonna with a prelude, this episode with you and I is probably not going to air for a few months, probably because I also have months of backlogged interview, and I don't do them in the order. So I don't do them all in the order
No,
that
I'm
I
the same
interview, right?
way. I'm the
Yeah,
same
you
way.
kind of go, no, this will fit better here because it's grand storytelling that you do that. But anyways, so knowing that this probably isn't going to air for a while, because you may be able to reference something that hasn't aired on your podcast yet. Has there been a moment that actually genuinely caught? I mean, I bet you there were a lot of moments like that, but moment that caught you by surprise that was like, whoa, I had not expected this.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
One that has aired at this point, Brian Cuban, which Mark Cuban's brother. But of course, we don't talk about Mark because it's not Mark's story; it's Brian's story.
It's
Brian brought up
Brian's.
Mark a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
times, but I know that I knew going in that he had gone through some addiction problems and what have you. I did not expect him, and I wasn't going to prod him into going into that particularly deeply.
Yeah.
He went into it very candidly and very deeply. And I'm just kind of sitting there nodding, like, okay, I've got to think of segues here because, this isn't rehearsed or pre-written, but he was so candid about it.
Yeah.
And which I appreciated because when we got to the end of his story, it made it that much more powerful. But it also, to me, I think it revealed something about him to where he leads off that episode talking about that he has no lack of awareness of his privilege, and everybody has a billionaire brother, right? But him coming back from what he came back from is more on him than he gives himself credit for.
Right.
It surprised me to see that, to capture that in a recording in real time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, other people, I mean, just the surreal moments, there's the episode with Lisa Welchel, who is the host of Collector's Call,
Yeah.
who was Blair on The Facts of Life. And just there's that little like kid and still inside of me. And it's like, okay, it's 2025 and you're talking to Blair from The Facts of Life, and you're talking to her a lot about Drew Barrymore, by the way,
Yeah.
because when we were at that taping in Drew's studio, Drew's show was taping. We weren't in like the thing. We were going to get to go in after the taping was over. I got to watch the taping on the screen in Lisa Welchel's green room. And it's like, that's a weird moment. Like if you're to hop in Doc and Marty's
Talk to
time
teenage Scott, right?
right. No, if you're to hop in Doc and Marty's time machine, it's like, okay, look, 2025, you're going to be sitting in a green room with Blair from The Facts of Life watching Drew Barrymore on being recorded on her 50th birthday while
Yeah.
you're holding a birthday card you're about to go give Drew in about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this
Like,
is a moment. And
who
then
is
you're
this
gonna
guy?
and then you're gonna talk to Lisa on a podcast that you're publishing. She's talking to you. She's a guest on
Yeah.
your show, not the other way around. That's kind of a moment as well where it's like, what
Yeah.
the? And then I'm not, you said this will run sometime down the road, so I'm not going to mention the name. I haven't recorded it yet. I
Yeah.
don't like to tempt fate. Things can
I
happen,
I understand. Look at how
but
long it took us to get together for this.
a couple days from now, I am scheduled to record with just an absolute entertainment legend. I mean, we're
Wow.
talking Hollywood Walk of
Well,
Fame.
see, I love that you haven't told me because then I can be I when I hear the episode, then I'll go, oh, that's who he was talking
Right.
about.
Hollywood Walk of Fame,
Yeah.
Tony Award winner, Grammy nominee. I mean, an
Yeah.
absolute legend of industry. And I'm like, and I didn't go get this one. This one came to me. And that's the
Wow.
part where it's like, what? So yes, pay attention because and we're recording this today. I'm supposed to record that one for 2 days from now.
Right, right. So like
Um,
middle September 2025.
right.
For those people listening to this, 20 years in the future.
So I'm going, right, right. So we're recording this on a Sunday morning. I'm supposed to record that on a Tuesday evening. Um, it's going to be kind of fast tracked into the rotation,
Right.
like
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I've got a bunch and I've got to air in a certain order here pretty quick because of a lot of the things we're talking about with
Yeah.
Collector's Call, Drew Barrymore show. I have a lot of episodes pre-recorded that go around that as a central theme, and they're going to have to run in a certain order. But I'll be announcing this one, assuming that the recording, happens as scheduled and everything, pretty quick, because this is one of those, I don't want to say it's one of those potential legitimizers, but it
Yeah.
is. Like
Yeah.
this
Like
is the
this
type
guy's
of thing
real. He's
where,
not just fooling around here.
right, where
Yeah.
potential guests hear that this is a person that I had on my show, they're going to go,
Right.
okay. Not
Yeah.
that I don't already have that to an extent with a Jim O'Hare, with a
Yeah.
Marilyn Gigliotti, with a Lisa Whelchel. It's not like I
Yeah.
don't already have that,
Yeah.
but it's one of these things where people all over the entertainment spectrum are gonna, this is the type of name that everybody knows and everybody's like, oh,
Right.
should be like that. And so I see it as not just a moment that it can be as a singular episode, but the moment that maybe that's the thing combined with everything around this whole like Drew centric run here we're going to have with the collector's call episode and everything airing, which is, going to happen after we're recording this, but before this episode runs from the sound
Yeah.
of things. This could be the thing. Maybe this is that next path, or
Right.
series of adventures that the roads take me down. I mean, the opportunity is there. I don't
Yeah.
want to ever sit there. This is by the way, for those checking this out, and for you as well, because you asked early on, when I chase goals, I mean, I aim high. I do just throw myself out there. It's like, okay, this
Yeah.
person did this. They're a human being. I'm a human being. There's not any
Yeah.
reason why I can't have at least some level of the same success in this space as this person did,
Right. Yeah.
because this person started with nothing when they got into this. They had
Yeah.
some luck and they learned some things. They probably failed 1,000 times before they had one yes type of thing, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
But the thing with that is, yeah, I never sit there and like, okay, I'm going to go with this. It's the thing of there's the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here and say, like, okay, let me take a moment and what are my assets? What are the opportunities that I have kind of swirling around me right now? And how can I try to piece those together into something that gives me another opportunity?
Yeah.
And I think with this is I'm never really looking for a destination per se. I mean, obviously there are points where I'd like to go. Um, I had that with going to the Drew Barrymore show set and meeting Drew. I had a friend of mine and he asked me, and I think he already knew this to a point, but he's like, okay, so when you got to walk into the set while they were all there, the audience was there and everything, you got to walk up that aisle towards Drew. I can't imagine what that moment was like for you. And it's weird because that moment walking in did not seem surreal. It did not seem weird because somehow I always knew I was going to be there.
Yeah.
Not because I think I'm special or awesome, but because that's something that I wanted to do. And so in my mind, I'd already done it in a way. Does that make sense?
Oh
I had
yeah.
someone a few years ago, it's like, you want to meet Drew, get tickets to her show and go fly up to New York and maybe you'll get a chance. I'm like, no, because something else is going to take me to that show in
Yeah.
a more official capacity.
Yeah.
And even now, as I talk about that, I don't say like that's the time where I finally met Drew. I talk about it, that's the first time I met Drew.
Right.
It
Yeah.
will happen again somehow, organically,
Yeah.
or through opportunities. I know in my heart it'll happen again.
Right.
And just got to kind of pay attention as things go. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now is like there's tremendous opportunity for my podcast to become something bigger than it is. And I hope that it can.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I never want to lose the message.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge. I could book 30 guests tomorrow. I got people who would say yes, but I want these stories. I want these
Yeah.
people. I want this right kind of energy, and I want this variance in topics and walks of life. But that's where it's at. I know I'm rambling. I do that. I warned you about that before we
Okay.
started recording.
That's what it's all about.
But yeah, that's where
Sometimes in the
that's
rambling we get into the really good
but
bits,
yeah.
right?
So I mean, like, overall to the question you asked now a long time ago, as far as like moments or whatever. Another way I look at this though is whatever that, like, I guess most surprising moment or biggest surprising moment, it has not happened yet.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Wherever this is going hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Because I look at this, and I appreciate, by the way, wanting to talk to me a lot about what I'm doing right now. a little bit about what I did before. Some people get so hung up on wanting to ask me all the questions about things I've done before, which I understand why they're there, but
Yeah.
I'm not doing those things now
Yeah.
from my seat. And at the time of recording this, I turned 50 in 1 month and 1 day. And I am convinced, I know in my heart that whatever I'm going to be best known for doing, I haven't done yet. That's the way. And I know that whatever I'm going
Yeah.
to be most, I hate the word to use it, famous for or remembered for, I have not done yet. All this
Yeah.
other stuff is a pregame show. I'm
Right,
not
right, right.
anywhere close to finish. I'm just getting started. But wherever it's going to go, this podcast, I believe, is what's going to take me there. Maybe it's the podcast itself. Maybe it's an opportunity that the podcast opens up. That I don't know. That part isn't written yet.
Awesome. Okay, as we get close to wrapping up, I like to ask my guests because my podcast is for writers and sort of creative people trying to take an honest and stark look at the reality, because the reality is not always sunshine and rainbows and lollipops.
Oh no.
Uh, but advice you would give to creatives who maybe, obviously haven't yet taken that, like I haven't put the book out. I haven't sent it to a publisher. I haven't perhaps even written it. Any sort of advice you would have for them?
Start. I mean, that's literally what it is. And don't get discouraged if it doesn't pop up with something right away or at all. I can cite my own story real quick, because I've talked a lot about it, but I'll cite another one here in a minute. So, my own story, how I got to an episode of Collector's Call that featured Drew and all that sort of thing. It was the second one. It's because I was pitching to Collector's Call for another appearance because I did an appearance on that show in 2023 that we shot in 2022. That first opportunity I got from them came because they spotted a news story that was done on me 5 years prior to that. Just a little fluff piece. And they were looking for someone that was knowledgeable about video games in the Dallas area for an episode they were going to shoot, the Collectors Call people.
Yeah.
And they found a news story that I had posted out there from 5 years prior because I had put out about this one little moment, this one little thing that I did. Well, someone thought it was interesting, did a piece on it. Just basically, long story short, having things out there starts popping up these opportunities, and just having it out there can be enough. It doesn't matter if it's polished or perfect or whatever. Perfection is a myth anyway. It does not exist. Quit chasing it, because it's subjective, and just it's already put it out there because you don't know that one thing might be the thing. And a good example of that from another story is episode I did on my podcast with Gary K. Wolf. He was the creator of Roger Rabbit. And he got into writing books. His first book he put out was published. Second book he put out, published. He put out books and they were published. He'd send stories in magazines, be published. He never got declined. He never got a no until his submission of Roger Rabbit. His Roger Rabbit book was rejected repeatedly for a long, 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 long time, multiple times, over and over and over and over and over. What's he best known for? Right?
The first novel, right?
But you see what I'm saying, though, right? It's
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
one that he started getting the no's is the one that ended up becoming his greatest success story.
yeah,
And the big part of it is he kept going. He put it out there and he kept going. He believed in it. And that's the thing, you creative types, it doesn't matter if anyone else believes in it at first. Odds are someone does believe in it anyway. They just kind
yeah,
of keep quiet. They kind of don't maybe express it. They're a quiet fan off in the background somewhere. But if you believe in it, that's the key. It doesn't matter if anyone else believes in it. It doesn't matter if it catches fire. Do you believe in it? Do you believe in what you're putting out there? Then put it out there because nothing's going to move forward until you do.
yeah. Awesome. I appreciate it. And this, to that end, dear listener, to that end, this episode would not exist had I not seen, and I don't know how I saw it, whether it was Facebook or Instagram, wherever I saw you had shared a post that just spoke to me, and I said, I really want to have a conversation with you. So I reached out, and lo and behold, you said yes. And so I'm so glad I did that. And so Scott, where can people find you? Where can they find your podcast, etc. on online?
You can get kind of the Cliff Notes version of me on my website, which is patrickscottpatterson.com. I say the Cliff Notes version because that's how websites need to work these days. If I put up everything, no one's going to read all that. Not
No,
anymore.
no, we're not
Um,
going to read the phone book here,
but
right?
you can find the Patrick Scott Patterson Project on all major podcast platforms. It's on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, a bunch of little ones that even I don't know quite where they're all being distributed to sometimes.
Wherever you listen to podcasts, probably.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The video version is on YouTube. The rest is audio at the present time. And I've been doing bi-weekly since I launched earlier in 2025, but I'm about to take it weekly. At least for now, knock on wood. I don't know how I'm gonna find it's more time involved, but I'm jumping in because it's just
Right.
I'm trusting those chains of fate because it seems like it's the right time to do it. So
Yeah.
here I am. And so I'm very excited by that. And I'm hoping that people will not just check it out, but that they'll maybe take something from it. My goal with it, anybody out there, it's a cynical, nasty world sometimes, social media can exhaust you. The news cycle can depress you. Everybody seems to be a little bit moodier and grumpier than they used to be. And even when you go out in public, um, at the end of the day, my podcast is aiming to not contribute to that. I'm looking at this to be an antidote to that, something that maybe can inspire people to do something for themselves, or at least for 45 minutes to an hour, give them an escape hatch from all this other stuff that's going on around. This is not going to be a hot button, hot topic, what's grinding my gears podcast.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them out there. They have a right to do whatever they want to do. I'm not that. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for an alternative to that, you're looking for an escape hatch, you're looking for some potential comfort food or a potential catalyst to something that maybe is in your heart or on your mind. I'm hoping you can go check out the Patrick Scott Patterson Project and listen to these stories with these guests that I have going on there. And I'm hopeful it can do for you what I want it to.
Awesome. Scott, thanks again so much for hanging out with me today.
I appreciate you having me out here, man. I really do. And it's just keep doing what you do as well.
Thanks. Oh, so much to reflect on. I think I mentioned this before the interview, but Patrick did take the podcast weekly, and it's a dynamic and fascinating show. Great conversation. Now, I have a link to his website and a link to his YouTube channel in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. And I love so much that the podcast is aiming to be an antidote to the negativity and that it's there to inspire people. Particularly considering what's going on in the US right now. I'm recording this on January 25th, 2026. I just love that there are people like Scott wanting to focus on the positive. I love the positivity that Scott exudes, and I love how positivity can be contagious because it can get overwhelming with so much of the negative BS flying at us from all directions. I think about how can we aim to be the Drew Barrymore show for people like Scott who need that comfort food. He had that happen for himself. He talked about that, how the Drew Barrymore show was exactly what he needed at the time. And I bet you his show is that for some other people out there, even if you'll never know who they are. And us as writers is something we need to remember as well. The things that we do, the stories we write, the things we share, those can be the comfort food that someone else needs. So I implore you, dear writer, don't give up. Maintain your passion for storytelling, for sharing your writing with the world, because I bet you, just like Scott had the Drew Barrymore show, just like people have Scott's show, your writing's going to have that positive impact on someone else out there. And trust me, there's someone else out there who needs it, who needs you. So don't give up, please. The other thing I wanted to reflect on was Scott talking about the value, the importance of having things out there and the opportunities that can come years later from that. He talked about, being on a fluffy news story from, 5 years earlier. And that's how he got on Collector's Call the first time. I think about stuff like that. So, for example, from my own experience, it's like, yeah, that does happen. I had a short story that I had not ever sold to a magazine, but I included it in a self-published horror collection of stories in 2004. It's a 1,000-word short story, and I never sold it, but I really liked it, and I thought, I have space for this, I'm going to include it. That story was called Almost. And it was basically a story about, it was kind of like the Tales from the Hook, the old Tales from the Hook. And I wanted to share that story from the point of view of the escaped convict and see his story from that one, because I thought it would be unique. Anyways, that was the story. Well, I was contacted by somebody 10 years later, in 2014, 10 years later, from an academic publisher who somehow found out about the story and wanted to reprint it in a program that was called iLit here in Canada. Now, let me be clear. I think maybe this book sold maybe 500 copies, if that, in those 10 years. So it's not like it was available broadly, but it was available. Someone got a hold of it. There was a photocopy, scan of the story from my story collection, so I know that's where they got it from. And anyways, they wanted to use the story for iLit, which was a customizable product that high school teachers here in Canada could use to create their own custom content. And they wanted to use my story because it was a 1,000-word story, but it very concisely illustrated, building suspense and tension. And it could be something that could be easily read and discussed. And I ended up selling it to them and making way more off that story than I would have had I sold it to a magazine at the 5 cents US a word at the time that I was looking for it. And even just a few weeks ago, another thing, just by putting things out there, the opportunities that come, is a few weeks ago I was interviewed, and I appeared on a CBC national radio program talking about scholastic book fairs in Canada. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes. It's darkreflections.ca. Actually, I completely forgot about it, by the way, until a friend from high school recently reached out and said, "Hey, I heard you on CBC of this program." And I was like, "What?" And anyways, because I completely forgot, because I talked to this reporter in December. But the reporter back in December was looking for book industry experts in Canada. Now, apparently, a search she had done via ChatGPT or some other AI search online returned me and the fact that I would be a good person to contact. And that led her to a contact form on my website. And that's how I got on that program. So I had stuff out there, lots of stuff out there, talks I've done, et cetera, but I'm curious as a writer and as a book industry expert, and somebody with 30 years of experience in the book industry, I'm wondering, what are the things I can do to help with that? So I know, for example, that Ricardo Lafayette, I think in an interview we had done for Drafted Digital, he talked about how to, Wikipedia is one of the places that they source, as well as list places like Goodreads and things like that. So trying to think of different strategies by which I can leverage being listed in such sources, so that when somebody's using that kind of search, maybe they find, hey, this would be a good person who you can talk to, for that media thing. Or here's a writer who writes this style. So I'm going to be digging into a little bit more of that. But again, the reflection is back to what Scott said about just having things out there. Again, more important for you to have those things out there. That's it for this episode. That's it for this reflection. Thank you so much for listening. And thanks to the awesome patrons who were hanging out with me earlier today on Sunday, January 25th. as we were hanging out, just an informal hangout for an hour, and we were chatting. We talked about music, we talked about writing, we talked about the weather and shoveling, especially this part of the world that I'm in right now. And it was just really lovely, and I really appreciated hanging out with folks. I do appreciate all my patrons and who support the podcast on patreon.com/darkreflection. And of course, I appreciate all of my listeners. Speaking of which, I recently did share something post-patron discussion over on my Patreon page, but I made it open and available for everyone. And it's me being completely goofy and doing an ode to John Candy playing Del Griffith in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's me basically lip-syncing when I was driving alone in the car on a 16-hour driving day this past summer when I was driving across the country. And it was a way to keep myself awake and alert and entertained because, I'm by myself. And I was listening to music, I was listening to audiobooks and stuff like that, but I just needed to do something. And so I decided I would record myself lip-syncing the entire Tub Thumping song by Chumbawamba. So I have that. I'll have that link over at the Patreon page as well. Just so if you're interested in a laugh, because God knows, we need something to smile about. We need something to laugh about right now. It'll be there for you. But again, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so appreciative that Scott took the time to come on this podcast, and I'm so glad that I got to share it with you. Yes, it's a little bit delayed, but I think this message and what Scott is doing with this podcast, I think this is the right timing. So sometimes that happens with those episodes too. So again, thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, please feel free to share it with someone that you think would find value in it, because that's a great way of helping me, and you may be helping somebody else. It's all about that paying it forward, as Scott talked about. Until next episode, this is, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.